And if you think that tone policing a black woman on national television is going to shut me up, then you clearly don't know who you're talking to. The words dropped like thunder. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett's voice was calm, deadly calm, the kind of quiet that comes before an earthquake. Across the studio, Rachel Maddow blinked. Once, twice. Her expression hardened, then cracked with disbelief. "No, excuse me," Maddow stammered, her hands gesturing in a tremble of barely restrained fury. "That's not what I said," Crockett didn't flinch. "What you said was coded. What you meant was clear, and I won't let you rewrite that in real time." The panel went silent. The producers cut to a wide shot. Somewhere in the control room, someone whispered, "Are we still live?" Maddow's eyes narrowed. "I am not your enemy, Congresswoman. Let's not play Twitter theater here." Crockett smiled small, sharp. "Funny, because Twitter already decided which of us just played themselves." The feed didn't cut. The microphones didn't mute. The internet didn't wait. Within minutes, Crockett's name was trending worldwide. Clapback Crockett. Maddow meltdown. Screens lit up in bars, airports, break rooms. People paused mid-scroll. Rewound. Played it again. And again. Because this wasn't just a disagreement. It was a rupture. The kind of moment where the veil slips, where authenticity slices through curation. Where the mask of civility fails to cover the bruises beneath. And in the middle of it all, two women, one gripping a legacy she thought was unshakable, the other rewriting what power sounds like on live television. But the most stunning part, Crockett didn't raise her voice. Not once. Maddow did. And that single detail, who screamed and who didn't, was about to spark a national reckoning because the line had been drawn. And Jasmine Crockett had just stepped over it with fire in her voice and history at her back. But that was only the beginning of the firestorm. 20 minutes earlier, the tone was civil, at least on the surface. The MSNBC panel was billed as a conversation on political polarization and institutional accountability. It was the kind of polished segment designed to seem brave without getting messy. Maddow sat at the helm, flanked by seasoned commentators and two invited guests, a Harvard policy scholar and Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. The topic? The weaponization of language in politics. The real topic? Who gets to define truth, and who gets punished for telling it? America, at that moment, was already smoldering. In the wake of a viral police brutality case, protests had reignited in major cities. Conservative pundits were capitalizing on the chaos, calling for law and order, and decrying radical race-baiting. Meanwhile, liberal media tried to thread a fragile needle condemning injustice without sounding too divisive. Enter Jasmine Crockett, a first-term congresswoman from Texas with courtroom scars and unapologetic edge. Crockett didn't show up to dance around anyone's comfort. Her presence wasn't just a contrast, it was a confrontation with the status quo. The moment she opened her mouth, the energy shifted. But Maddow wasn't rattled yet. She leaned into her usual role, arbiter of reason, polished skeptic. She nodded graciously, even as Crockett challenged the very foundations of the media's sanitized narratives. "The danger," Crockett had said, "isn't just the far right. It's the silence of allies who speak equality, but fear discomfort. The truth doesn't get filtered through your earpiece." The room stiffened. Maddow's jaw tensed. Still, she smiled. "Congresswoman, with respect, I think we're conflating media responsibility with—" "I'm not conflating anything," Crockett interrupted, voice smooth as steel. "I'm responding to a pattern, the liberal tendency to call for civility in the face of cruelty." The table grew still. Maddow's smile faded. Outside the studio, the internet was already buzzing. Clips from earlier in the segment had been clipped and posted in real time. People weren't just watching, they were choosing sides. Because this wasn't just political theater. It was cultural fault lines playing out in real time. Maddow, the decorated host, had spent years building credibility with progressive audiences, but to some, she now represented a brand of liberalism that valued performance over pressure, etiquette over equity. Crockett, on the other hand, was raw power, lived experience in motion, a disruptor not asking for permission. And when Maddow, moments later, would attempt to clarify Crockett's statement, what followed wouldn't be a misunderstanding. It would be a detonation. What Jasmine said flipped the conversation upside down, and what Maddow did next made it explode. For nearly 2 decades, Rachel Maddow has been a lighthouse for liberal America, an Oxford-educated Rhodes Scholar who turned cable news into a sanctuary for thoughtful resistance. She wasn't loud like Olbermann. She wasn't theatrical like Carlson. She was the calm in the chaos, the brainy anchor with facts, wit, and just enough snark to make truth feel cathartic. Viewers trusted her. Millions tuned in to hear her dissect lies, expose corruption, and speak truth to power. In the era of Trump, she became more than a host. She was a cultural compass, the reassuring voice reminding progressives that the good fight still had leaders on the airwaves. But every pedestal casts a shadow. In recent years, Maddow's influence has begun to wear the weight of expectation. Critics, especially from younger, more diverse audiences, have raised questions about the guests she doesn't feature, about how stories get framed, about her tone when conversations veer into territory she can't intellectually control. There's a pattern, they say, a quiet gatekeeping cloaked in civility, a preference for voices that speak the language of policy papers, not protest chants. So when Jasmine Crockett entered the frame not just as a guest, but as a force, it challenged more than just the conversation. It challenged Maddow's domain. The interruption wasn't scripted. Maddow had just finished offering what she framed as a nuanced interpretation of systemic inequality laced with academic detachment and a cautious optimism. Crockett responded with directness. That nuance sounds beautiful until you're the one bleeding from its consequences. Maddow blinked, visibly. Then came the pivot. Well, if we're being fair, Congresswoman, Maddow said, leaning in with that practiced smile. Language matters, and some of your phrasing could be perceived as inflammatory, especially by those who, that's when it happened. Crockett shot back, calm and clear. Inflammatory to whom? The people living the violence, or the ones reporting on it? The tension ignited. Maddow's voice rose, no longer tempered by academia. This is a national platform, and we have a responsibility. To whom, Rachel? Crockett snapped, still steady. Because it's starting to sound like respectability is your only concern. That was the break. The crack in the mask. Maddow sat back, lips tight. Her next words came quicker, harder. I think you're being unfair. You're mischaracterizing my point entirely. But her tone had shifted. Gone was the deliberate pacing. In its place, defensiveness, edge, panic. The internet caught it instantly, frame by frame, voice by voice. The icon of composed liberalism was unraveling live. Social media didn't wait. Screens were split. One side seeing a woman defending herself against rudeness, the other witnessing a powerful media figure lash out when her narrative control slipped. And it was the latter that stuck, because this wasn't a disagreement about facts. It was about ownership, about who gets to speak and who gets told to be quiet nicely. Maddow had spent years cultivating an image of elevation, but in that moment her tone turned sharp, her voice cracked, and her presence, once unshakable, seemed exposed. She interrupted. She deflected. She tried to reframe. But nothing landed, because across from her sat a woman unmoved. Jasmine Crockett didn't blink, didn't match the volume, didn't cave to the tactics that so often deflate black women in professional spaces. She held her ground, and Maddow, whether she realized it or not, stepped into a role she never intended. Not the voice of justice, but the symbol of a system that still believes it gets to set the rules. But Crockett didn't just hold her ground. She flipped the script in a way that would change everything. Jasmine Crockett didn't enter politics to play nice. She was born in St. Louis, raised in the proud, pulsing South, where church pews taught power and kitchen tables taught survival. Her mother, a teacher. Her father, a community leader with grit in his voice. Crockett grew up watching people talk back to injustice before they had a microphone, watching them organize block by block, knowing that being right didn't guarantee being heard. Before the halls of Congress, before the cameras, she stood in courtrooms. As a civil rights attorney, she took on cases no one wanted: police brutality, wrongful arrests, disenfranchisement. She didn't just argue the law. She knew how it felt. The tremor in a mother's hand. The silence of a father pulled over one too many times. The quiet dignity of people who didn't have media allies, but had her. That's what built her voice, not punditry. Practice. When she ran for Texas House District 100, people said she wouldn't win. Too bold, too raw, not polished enough. But Crockett didn't polish her edges. She sharpened them. And when she took the seat, she flipped every expectation on its head. She became known as a firebrand, but not the reckless kind. Her style in hearings was precise, surgical. There's a clip that still circulates from a congressional oversight committee. Crockett dismantling a witness with such rapid-fire facts, even Republican colleagues couldn't look up. She speaks, like a storm rolling in slow at first, then impossible to ignore. But more than anything, she became a symbol. For women who code switch daily. For black girls told to lower their voice and raise their GPA. For people who have to justify their anger just to be allowed in the room. By the time she landed on Maddow's panel, she wasn't just a guest. She was a lightning rod. Because Crockett doesn't go on shows to smile politely. She goes to speak plainly. And in a media landscape that often rewards the passive-aggressive over the plain-spoken, her very existence is disruptive. Which is why, when Rachel Maddow tried to pivot the conversation to wrap it in neutrality and nuance, Crockett didn't flinch. Because for her, this wasn't theory. It was biography. She knew exactly what was happening. The smile that concealed correction. The calm that hid control. The friendly tone that felt like a leash. And so she delivered the line that would ripple across every feed, every group chat, every dinner table. If you think that tone policing a black woman on national television is going to shut me up, then you clearly don't know who you're talking to. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't break character. Because this was her character. Decades of microaggressions distilled into one sentence. Generations of underestimated women speaking through her. The frustration of watching people rewrite history, reframed in real time, with surgical precision. What happened next wasn't accidental. Crockett had studied the rules, knew the cameras, anticipated the backlash. She had seen what happens to women like her when they speak truth in white spaces. The headlines shift. The tone is dissected. The point gets lost, so she made sure the point couldn't be missed. And it wasn't. The internet erupted not just because of what she said, but how she said it. Steady, clear, unapologetic. She didn't blink. She didn't soften. And she didn't need to. Young activists called it a masterclass. Elders called it familiar. Her followers jumped by tens of thousands overnight. Hashtags exploded. Memes bloomed. And in comment sections from coast to coast, one sentiment echoed again and again. She said what needed to be said. Because Crockett didn't just win the moment. She owned the narrative. She wasn't just clapping back. She was carving space. For truth, for dignity, for the millions who had sat through meetings, lectures, and panels, feeling that same slow burn, wondering if they were crazy, or just surrounded by people too polite to admit the truth. This wasn't just another debate. This was her moment to define the conversation, and she did. Maddow inhaled sharply, her hand twitching toward her notes. "Congresswoman, just so we're clear for viewers at home," she began, smoothing the tremor in her voice, "your statement about media complicity, that's a serious claim. Do you have specific examples?" "I live the examples," Crockett replied, eyes locked forward. "And so do millions of others who never get booked on this show." The studio pulsed with tension. Maddow's signature poise, so famously cool, almost surgical, began to thin. Her brow furrowed. She turned toward Crockett, posture straightening, like a shield snapping into place. "With respect," Maddow countered, "this platform has long elevated marginalized voices. I'm not sure it's fair to suggest." Crockett tilted her head slowly. "Rachel, what you're not sure of is part of the problem. No spike in volume, no visible anger. Just words, dropped with the weight of lived experience." Maddow blinked, as if the air had shifted, and she hadn't noticed until it was too late. "But we're on the same side," Maddow insisted, a note of urgency breaking through. "We want the same outcomes: justice, accountability." "Then let's talk about how we get there," Crockett replied. "Because respectability won't get us where reality demands we go." The tension was no longer abstract, it was visible. Maddow's smile had disappeared. Her shoulders tensed, hands now visibly fidgeting with a pen. She glanced once to the producers off camera, as if seeking refuge. Crockett didn't budge. Maddow leaned forward. "I just think there's a way to bring people in without alienating the moderates." "There it is," Crockett said gently. "The warning, the leash, the reminder to be nice, even when we're bleeding." Maddow exhaled sharply. "You're misrepresenting what I'm saying." "No," Crockett replied, her tone smooth, quiet, immovable. "I'm hearing what you're not saying, loud and clear." The air in the room changed. Not because Crockett yelled. She didn't, but because Maddow did what she rarely does. She raised her voice. "I'm trying to have a conversation, not be accused of—" "And I'm trying to have a reckoning," Crockett cut in, calm as ever. "You're bringing decorum to a gunfight." Silence. The panelists froze. The audience didn't breathe. Even Maddow, momentarily stunned, let the moment hang in the air. Then she looked away just briefly, but long enough for the balance to shift, because the audience saw it now. The unraveling, the loss of control. The disbelief that this woman, this first-term Congresswoman, wasn't deferring, wasn't folding, wasn't giving Maddow the home court advantage she'd grown used to. And the more Maddow faltered, the more Crockett steadied. This wasn't just a debate, it was a mirror, one showing a media giant trying to reassert control in a moment she no longer owned. And across from her sat a storm in human form, unmoved, unwavering, unapologetic. Maddow adjusted her mic, tried to regain footing. "Well, I think we're veering into personal attacks here." Crockett blinked once, then she smiled, and then Jasmine dropped the line that would break the internet. Jasmine Crockett leaned slightly forward. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't flinch. But when she spoke, the room stopped moving. "You don't get to reframe my reality." The words hung thick and deliberate, slicing through the fluorescent stillness of the studio. Rachel Maddow opened her mouth to respond, but didn't. "Not yet. Every time a black woman speaks with clarity," Crockett continued, "someone says we're being aggressive. Every time we demand truth, someone asks us to calm down. But when you sanitize injustice, you get to stay credible. When we name it, we're called divisive." Maddow's lips parted again, half word, half rebuttal, but nothing came out. Crockett didn't wait. "I've spent my life walking into rooms like this one, where people smile while trying to shrink you, where they soften the edges of racism so they don't have to feel responsible for it. And I'm telling you right now, I'm done making white comfort the cost of my credibility." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was loaded with reckoning. Off camera. Producers didn't cut to commercial. They didn't mute her mic. They knew what everyone watching at home knew. This wasn't a moment. It was the moment, and Twitter knew it too. Crockett Clapback shot to trending within 3 minutes. One tweet read, "This wasn't a debate. It was a masterclass. Congresswoman Crockett, I see you." Another, "Rachel tried it. Jasmine ended it. Poise, precision, power." Crockett continued, each word like a slow heartbeat. "Because here's the truth. I don't get to show up angry. I don't get to be tired. I don't get to say what needs to be said without someone checking my tone." She turned slightly to face Maddow directly. "But you do. You get to interrupt. You get to label. You get to act like challenging you is a threat to the movement when really it's just the movement growing past you." Gasps. Audible now. Not just in studio but online. Live comments scrolled by the second. "Did she just say that on MSNBC? Maddow looks like she just saw her legacy walk out the door." This is what fearless representation looks like. On TikTok, the stitches started within the hour. Influencers replayed the segment, pointing at Crockett's every line like gospel. Political commentators pulled it into reaction videos. Activists clipped it into compilations of media moments that changed the game. And Crockett wasn't finished. "I came here tonight knowing this might happen. I came here knowing I'd be told I'm too much, that I should be grateful to be here at all. But here's the thing, Rachel." She let the pause settle. Let the eyes stay fixed on her. "I didn't come to be tolerated. I came to tell the truth." Maddow's face was a quiet portrait of stunned calculation, part disbelief, part wounded pride. She wasn't used to being spoken to. She was used to being spoken with. There's a difference, and tonight, it mattered. "I know what it means when someone like me refuses to flinch," Crockett said, eyes unblinking. "It means they'll say I was disrespectful. They'll call it a meltdown. But we know what this really was. This was power that didn't need permission." The panel sat. In stunned silence, a wide shot revealed Maddow stiff in her chair, her arms folded, her script abandoned. No retort, no clever pivot. Just the look of someone watching a narrative she thought she controlled slip through her fingers. Crockett finished softly, but with undeniable weight. "I'm not here to be palatable. I'm here to be heard. And you don't get to reframe my reality to make yours feel safer." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was sacred. A moment of unfiltered truth, spoken without apology, broadcast without a mute button. Somewhere, someone whispered, "We're witnessing a shift." And they were, because what Crockett delivered wasn't just a clapback, it was a cultural declaration, a line drawn in primetime sand, a refusal to dim so someone else could keep their illusion of control intact. By the time the segment cut to commercial, it was already too late. The internet had crowned her, not just as a viral sensation, but as a necessary voice for an era tired of compromise. The camera panned out, the studio lights dimmed, and Maddow remained silent. But the studio was just the beginning. What happened next shook political media. By the time morning came, the clip had racked up 23 million views. It played on loop in morning classrooms, work Zooms, airport lounges, and on smartphones lit by 3 a.m. insomnia. Jasmine Crockett wasn't just trending, she was transcending. She'd moved from a congresswoman known in activist circles to a household name overnight. Cable news anchors scrambled. Commentators struggled to find language that matched the moment. MSNBC issued a curt statement. "We welcome difficult conversations and stand by our commitment to diverse perspectives." But behind the scenes, sources reported internal chaos, panicked producers, split editorial teams, and executives debating whether to book Crockett again or quietly ghost her. They were too late. America had already made its decision. The moment had become movement. TikTok flooded with clips from Crockett's past hearings. Moments when she'd cornered evasive witnesses, called out hypocrisy with a calm precision that now seemed prophetic. Teen creators lip-synced her monologue in viral trends. Young women of color stitched her final line, "You don't get to reframe my reality," over their own stories, about job interviews, classrooms, courtrooms, hospital visits. In those 20 words, they'd heard themselves. On X, formerly Twitter, the culture war lines hardened. Progressive lawmakers voiced support. Repatriator Ayanna Pressley tweeted, "This is what leadership looks like. Bold, unapologetic, true." Senator Cory Booker called Crockett's words a righteous disruption at the exact right moment. Meanwhile, conservative pundits went on the offensive, labeling her outburst unprofessional, divisive, angry. But their attempts at condemnation only amplified her. Because people weren't just watching the clip, they were watching the reaction to the clip. And the contrast was glaring. Critics clutched pearls. Supporters passed the mic. Celebrities joined the fray. Kerry Washington posted a photo of Crockett mid-sentence with the caption, "Say it louder for the people in the back." Ava DuVernay simply tweeted, "Mike dropped, history made. Podcasts dropped emergency episodes. Newsletters hit inboxes titled, 'What Crockett Exposed About Media Power' and 'The Myth of the Safe Ally.'" But beyond the headlines and blue checks, something quieter and more powerful was happening. In barbershops, on college campuses, in group chats from Brooklyn to Baton Rouge, people were talking about tone, truth, and who gets to tell it. Black women spoke openly about being silenced in liberal spaces. Young voters said they felt energized again, reminded that politics wasn't just theater, it could still be rebellion. At a protest in Chicago, a speaker quoted Crockett's line through a bullhorn. The crowd erupted. At a poetry open mic in Atlanta, a 17-year-old recited a spoken word piece titled, "Reframed No More." Even in corporate boardrooms, DEI teams referenced the moment as a case study in lived experience versus institutional fragility. And yet, for all the momentum, not everyone knew what to do with it. Some anchors tried to downplay it, calling it an unfortunate breakdown in communication. Others tried to spin it, two strong women clashing in the heat of the moment. But those takes felt hollow, because everyone had seen what happened, and everyone remembered who screamed and who didn't. In the days that followed, Crockett remained composed. She didn't gloat. She didn't apologize. Instead, she posted a simple video. Just her walking through her district, shaking hands, hugging elders. The caption read, "Still doing the work. Always." That post alone got 2.8 million likes. For her supporters, the moment was a reckoning. For her critics, it was a disruption. For Rachel Maddow, it was silence. MSNBC quietly pulled the full segment from its website. Archived versions reappeared on alternative platforms, shared with headlines like, "The clip they don't want you to see." But the truth had already escaped containment, because Crockett's words weren't just a mic drop. They were a mirror, and America had been forced to look. And just when it seemed things were settling, a shocking twist reignited the fire. 3 days after the segment aired, Jasmine Crockett finally broke her silence. She posted a video to her account, not on a news network, not through a press release. Just her seated in front of a bookshelf filled with case files and family photos. No makeup team, no lighting crew, just her voice. "I've seen the headlines," she began. "I've seen the labels. And I've seen the love." She paused, letting the weight of the moment settle. "I want to be clear. I didn't come to that panel looking for a viral moment. I came to speak the truth. And if the truth makes people uncomfortable, maybe it's time we ask why." The message wasn't defensive, it wasn't boastful. It was measured, intentional, delivered, with the same calm fire that had made the original moment so powerful. She addressed her critics directly. To those calling me angry, you're right. I am angry. I'm angry that black women have to contort ourselves to be heard. I'm angry that the truth gets labeled divisive when it's spoken from the margins. But my anger isn't dangerous. It's disciplined. It's directed. And it's overdue. She didn't mention Maddow by name. She didn't need to. What she did mention was legacy. I come from a people who built this country and were told to stay quiet about it. I come from a generation that knows change doesn't come when we wait our turn. It comes when we speak out, even when our voices shake or make others uncomfortable. Clips from the video were instantly repackaged. Activists turned her lines into banners. Professors assigned the segment in media studies classes. Journalists who had once criticized her pivoted, some now calling the moment the beginning of a new media accountability era. But Crockett wasn't chasing credit. "This is bigger than a soundbite," she said near the end of her message. "This is about power. About who gets to name what's real. About why people like me are expected to shrink just to make systems feel safe." She leaned in, voice soft but unwavering. The truth doesn't need polish. It just needs space. Then, a final line, quiet, but electric. This wasn't about winning an argument. This was about making it clear. We're not asking for the mic anymore. We're keeping it. And with that, the video ended. No dramatic music. No fade to black. Just silence and the knowledge that something had shifted. Because Crockett didn't just walk away with a viral clip. She walked away having redrawn the boundaries of the debate. She changed the posture of political discourse, forced institutions to look inward, forced audiences to look deeper. She didn't just win the argument, she changed the terms. Rachel Maddow screamed, Jasmine Crockett didn't. But it wasn't the volume that made headlines. It was the truth behind the calm and the discomfort it stirred. Her clapback wasn't just viral, it was visceral. It shook the foundations of who gets to speak and who's expected to listen. So now, the question isn't just what happened that night on live TV. The question is, what does this moment reveal about the stories we're told? And the storytellers we trust, who gets framed as the voice of reason and who gets reduced to a soundbite? This wasn't just a clash between two women. It was a collision between comfort and confrontation, between polished narratives and lived truth. And the echo of that moment still hasn't faded. So ask yourself, whose voices will you elevate? If you stand with unfiltered truth, subscribe. If you've ever been told to shrink yourself, share this. If you believe authenticity should never be punished, drop a comment and let your voice be heard. Because in a world full of noise, dignity echoes the loudest.